You know what's absolutely fascinating? Throughout most of human history, there was one person in every community who wielded incredible power, who literally held life and death in their hands. Yet we barely talk about them today. Tonight, I want to tell you about midwives, the extraordinary women who stood at the threshold between this world and the next, who caught every baby born in their communities, who possessed knowledge that both awed and frightened people. These weren't just birth attendants. They were keepers of profound secrets, trusted advisors to queens and peasants alike, spiritual guides who helped souls enter the world. So, get comfortable, settle in, and let me take you back to a candlelit birthing room where a midwife named Agnes is working through the night, her experienced hands steady and calm, while a young mother cries out in pain and fear. This is a story about a kind of power that has nothing to do with armies or wealth. Power that comes from knowledge, from being present at life's most vulnerable moments, from standing at the gateway between worlds. This is the story of the ancient midwives, the gatekeepers of life. In the ancient and medieval world, childbirth was the single most dangerous event most women would ever face. More dangerous than illness, more dangerous than accidents, more dangerous than almost anything else in a life full of dangers. When a woman went into labor, she knew she might not survive. Everyone knew this. Death in childbirth was common enough that it was expected, feared, prepared for. Every woman who became pregnant understood she was risking her life. And standing at that terrifying threshold, the only person allowed into the birthing chamber, besides the laboring woman and perhaps a few female relatives, was the midwife. Let me introduce you to Agnes. She's about 55 years old, lives in a medieval English town, and has been a midwife for more than 30 years. She's attended hundreds of births, maybe even 1,000 by now. She's caught babies who came into the world screaming and healthy. She's caught babies who were born silent and still. She's saved mothers who everyone thought would die. She's lost mothers who seemed fine until suddenly they weren't. She's seen absolutely everything that can happen during childbirth. Every variation, every complication, every miracle, and every tragedy. And this experience, this knowledge she carries, it gives her a kind of power that's hard for us to understand today. Agnes isn't wealthy, she's not noble, she has no formal education, can't read or write. But she possesses knowledge that no one else has. Knowledge that makes her essential, irreplaceable, respected, and even feared. She knows things about women's bodies that even women themselves don't know. She understands the mysteries of birth, of how life enters the world. And this knowledge, in a world that saw birth as sacred and mysterious, gave her real power. When a woman goes into labor, usually in the middle of the night because babies seem to prefer arriving at the most inconvenient times, someone comes running to Agnes's house. A husband, a sister, a neighbor, someone breathless and frightened, banging on her door, begging her to come quickly. And Agnes, no matter how tired she is, no matter what time it is, no matter if it's raining or snowing or she's sick herself, she gathers her bag of supplies and goes. This is her calling, her sacred duty, the work that defines her entire life. She arrives at the laboring woman's house and enters a space that's exclusively female. The birthing chamber, usually just a bedroom in the family's home, has been closed to men. The husband and father of the child about to be born isn't allowed in. Brothers, male relatives, male neighbors, they're all excluded. This is women's territory, women's mystery, women's sacred space. Only women attend births, and among those women, Agnes is the undisputed authority, The room is dim, lit by candles or oil lamps. It's warm, often uncomfortably warm, because the prevailing medical theory is that warmth helps labor progress. There might be a fire burning, even in summer. The laboring woman is usually on a bed, or sometimes in a special birthing chair designed to help with delivery. Other women crowd the room, female relatives and neighbors who've come to support and help. Everyone is tense, worried, praying. Childbirth is dangerous, and everyone knows it. Agnes enters this charged atmosphere, and immediately everything shifts. Her presence brings authority and calm. She's seen this before, hundreds of times. She knows what she's doing. The other women defer to her, step aside, wait for her instructions. The laboring woman, even through her pain, feels some relief that Agnes is here. If anyone can get her through this alive, it's Agnes. Agnes approaches the laboring woman and speaks to her in a calm, reassuring voice. She asks questions about when the pains started, how frequent they are, whether her water has broken. Then she examines the woman, and this examination is intimate in a way that's hard to overstate. Agnes needs to know how dilated the cervix is, how the baby is positioned, whether everything seems normal. She does this with her hands, with touch, with examination that, in any other context, would be completely inappropriate. But Agnes is the midwife, and this intimate access to women's bodies is part of her role, accepted and necessary. The knowledge she's gathering through this examination is sophisticated. She's feeling for things that take years of experience to understand, checking the baby's position, assessing whether the pelvis is adequate for delivery, looking for warning signs of complications. All of this knowledge is in her hands, in her experience, passed down from the midwife who trained her, refined through decades of practice. And beyond the physical examination, Agnes is also assessing the woman's emotional state. Is she frightened? Is she able to cope with the pain? Does she need encouragement, or does she need to be told firmly what to do? Every woman is different, every labor is different, and Agnes has to adapt her approach to what this particular woman needs in this particular moment. She knows what to say to help a woman through unbearable pain. She knows when to be gentle and when to be firm. She knows how to project confidence even when she's worried, how to keep everyone calm when panic would be the natural response. This emotional and psychological skill is as important as her medical knowledge, maybe more important, because a frightened woman can't labor effectively, can't work with her body to bring the baby forth. As the labor progresses, Agnes monitors everything constantly. She's checking the strength of contractions, the frequency, the progress of dilation. She's listening to the baby's heartbeat by pressing her ear against the mother's swollen belly. She's watching for danger signs, bleeding that's too heavy, labor that's too slow, exhaustion that might prevent the mother from pushing effectively when the time comes. She makes decisions constantly, small adjustments that might seem minor, but that can make the difference between an easy birth and a difficult one. Should the mother walk around or lie down? Should she eat something for energy, or would that make her vomit? Should they try to speed up labor with certain herbs, or let it progress naturally? Every decision is based on Agnes's experience, her intuition developed over 30 years of attending births. And then, finally, after hours or sometimes days of labor, the moment arrives. The baby begins to crown, the head appearing at the opening, and Agnes is there with her hands ready. This is the moment she's been waiting for, the moment when all her skill and experience come together. She guides the baby's head out gently, supporting the mother's tissue to prevent tearing. She checks that the cord isn't wrapped around the baby's neck. She helps the shoulders emerge, first one, then the other. And then suddenly, miraculously, the whole baby slips out into her waiting hands. She holds this new life, this tiny human who a moment ago was inside the mother and now is separate, is its own being. She clears the baby's airways, checks that it's breathing, watches for that first breath, that first cry. And when the baby does cry, when that sound fills the room, there's an explosion of relief and joy. The mother has survived. The baby is alive. Agnes has done it again, has successfully guided another soul into the world. She cuts the umbilical cord, that final physical connection between mother and child, and ties it off carefully. She examines the baby quickly, checking for any obvious problems, counting fingers and toes, making sure everything seems normal. Then she cleans the baby, wraps it in cloth, and places it in its mother's arms. This moment, this transfer of the baby from her hands to the mother's, is the culmination of everything, the reason for all the years of training and experience and middle-of-the-night calls. But Agnes's work isn't done yet. She still needs to deliver the placenta, needs to check that the mother isn't bleeding too heavily, needs to clean and care for the mother, needs to make sure both mother and baby are stable and safe. The hours immediately after birth are still dangerous, and Agnes stays vigilant, watching for complications, ready to intervene if necessary. Only when she's satisfied that everything is truly fine, that mother and baby are both healthy and safe, does Agnes finally allow herself to relax slightly. Another successful birth. Another life brought safely into the world. Another mother who survived the most dangerous thing she'll ever do. And Agnes, tired but satisfied, knows that she's fulfilled her sacred duty once again, has stood at the threshold between life and death, and guided both mother and child safely through. Now let's talk about the incredible knowledge Agnes possesses, because midwifery in ancient and medieval times wasn't just about catching babies. It was about understanding herbs and remedies, about knowing which plants could ease pain or stop bleeding or help labor progress. Agnes is essentially a walking pharmacy, carrying in her head knowledge about dozens of medicinal plants and how to use them. This knowledge has been passed down through generations of midwives, refined through centuries of observation and experience. Agnes learned her herbal knowledge from the midwife who trained her, a woman named Margaret, who was already old when Agnes was young. Margaret took her into forests and fields, showed her which plants to gather and when, taught her how to prepare them, how to judge dosages, how to recognize which remedies worked for which problems. This education happened over years, through apprenticeship, through watching and doing, and gradually being trusted with more and more responsibility. One of the most important herbs in Agnes's bag is raspberry leaf. She makes tea from dried raspberry leaves and gives it to women in late pregnancy and during early labor. This tea, she's learned through experience, helps strengthen the uterus, makes contractions more effective, can speed up labor that's progressing too slowly. Modern science has actually confirmed what midwives knew for centuries. Raspberry leaf does contain compounds that affect uterine muscle, though the medieval midwives didn't know the mechanism, they just knew it worked. For pain relief, Agnes uses several different herbs. Willow bark, when made into tea, helps with pain, though it's bitter and hard to drink. We now know willow bark contains salicin, which the body converts to salicylic acid, essentially natural aspirin. But Agnes just knows that women who drink willow bark tea seem to cope better with labor pain. She also uses poppy seeds, though sparingly, because she knows they can make women too drowsy to push effectively. Chamomile tea helps women relax between contractions, helps them conserve energy for the hard work ahead. For heavy bleeding, which is one of the most dangerous complications of childbirth, Agnes has several remedies. She uses shepherd's purse, a common plant that she's learned can help the uterus contract after delivery, helping to stop bleeding. She uses yarrow, another herb that seems to help with blood clotting. And she uses ergot, a fungus that grows on rye, though she's extremely careful with this one because too much can be dangerous. Ergot causes powerful uterine contractions, can help expel the placenta and contract the uterus to stop bleeding, but it can also cause serious problems if used incorrectly. Agnes also knows about herbs that can induce labor when a pregnancy has gone dangerously long, when the mother is exhausted and the baby needs to be born. Pennyroyal, rue, and black cohosh all have properties that can stimulate contractions. But these are dangerous herbs that Agnes uses only when absolutely necessary, only when the risk of not inducing labor is greater than the risk of the herbs themselves. She's seen what can happen when these herbs are used incorrectly, has seen women hemorrhage or babies die, so she treats them with great respect and caution. But Agnes's knowledge isn't limited to herbs taken internally. She also knows about poultices and compresses, topical remedies that can help with specific problems. For perineal tearing, which often happens during delivery, she makes a poultice from comfrey, a plant that promotes tissue healing. She knows to clean wounds with warm water boiled with certain antiseptic herbs, though she doesn't know about bacteria or infection in a scientific sense. She just knows from experience that cleaning wounds this way helps prevent the fever and rot that can kill women after childbirth. She uses oil infusions too, oils that have been infused with herbs and can be used for massage or to ease the baby's passage during delivery. She makes an oil with St. John's wort and lavender that she uses to massage the perineum during labor, helping to stretch the tissue and make tearing less likely. She makes another oil with calendula that promotes healing and can be applied to any tears or wounds after delivery. Agnes also knows techniques that don't involve herbs at all, manual techniques that take incredible skill and experience. If a baby is positioned wrong, is breech or transverse instead of head down, Agnes knows how to try to turn the baby externally, using only her hands on the mother's belly. She presses and manipulates carefully, trying to encourage the baby to move into a better position. This doesn't always work, and it requires enormous experience to know exactly how much pressure to apply, how to feel what the baby is doing, when to persist, and when to give up. But when it does work, when she successfully turns a breech baby, she can make the difference between a delivery that's possible and one that will almost certainly kill the mother. She knows how to manually remove a placenta that hasn't delivered on its own, reaching inside the uterus, separating the placenta from the uterine wall and pulling it out. This is dangerous, risky, can cause massive bleeding or infection, but sometimes it's necessary when the alternative is letting the mother bleed to death. Agnes does this only when she must, with great care, and afterwards she watches the mother intensely for any signs of fever or bleeding. She knows how to deliver a baby whose shoulder has gotten stuck, a complication called shoulder dystocia that can kill the baby within minutes if not resolved. She knows specific maneuvers, ways of positioning the mother and manipulating the baby that can free the stuck shoulder. She's practiced these techniques, has learned them from watching other midwives, has refined them through her own experience. All of this knowledge, both the herbal remedies and the manual techniques, was learned entirely through observation and apprenticeship. There are no textbooks for Agnes to study, no medical schools she could attend, even if such things existed for women, which they don't. Everything she knows, she learned from other midwives, from watching births, from trial and error, from paying attention to what works and what doesn't over hundreds of births. And she's constantly learning, constantly refining her knowledge. When a remedy works particularly well, she makes note of it, remembers it for next time. When something doesn't work or causes problems, she adjusts her approach. This experiential learning, this accumulation of knowledge through practice, has made her extraordinarily skilled, has given her a depth of understanding that comes only from decades of hands-on experience. The other women in her community know about Agnes's knowledge, know she's not just a midwife, but also a healer, an herbalist, someone who understands medicine in ways that few people do. They come to her for other health problems too, not just childbirth. A woman with terrible menstrual cramps asks Agnes for help. A woman who can't get pregnant seeks Agnes's advice. A woman suffering from the changes of menopause asks what can ease her symptoms. Agnes helps them all, drawing on her vast knowledge of women's bodies and herbal remedies. This knowledge gives Agnes power and status, but it also makes her somewhat dangerous in the eyes of some people. In later medieval times, women with too much knowledge about herbs, women who seemed to have power over life and death, were sometimes accused of witchcraft. Agnes is careful, very careful, about how she presents her knowledge. She frames everything in Christian terms, credits God with any successful outcomes, is humble and deferential in public, even though in the birthing chamber she's absolutely authoritative. She knows that her knowledge, as valuable as it is, as necessary as it is, can also make her vulnerable to accusation and persecution if she's not careful. As Agnes prepares another batch of raspberry leaf tea, crushing the dried leaves carefully, adding them to boiling water, straining the liquid into a clean cup, she thinks about all the women who taught her, all the midwives stretching back through generations who discovered these remedies, who learned what worked through observation and experience and passed that knowledge down. She's a link in a chain of knowledge that stretches back further than anyone can remember, and she takes that responsibility seriously. Someday she'll pass this knowledge to younger midwives, will teach them everything she knows, will ensure that the wisdom of centuries continues forward into the future. For now, she's the keeper of this knowledge, the guardian of these secrets, the one who knows how to ease pain and stop bleeding and bring babies safely into the world using the gifts that nature provides. But Agnes isn't just a medical practitioner, isn't just someone with knowledge of herbs and birthing techniques. She also serves a spiritual role. And this is crucial to understanding the true scope of her power and authority. In medieval Christian society, but really in most ancient and traditional societies, birth was understood as a sacred event, a moment when the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds was particularly thin. And the midwife was the person who stood at that boundary, who mediated between worlds, who helped souls cross from wherever they came from into physical life. Agnes believes this deeply. She's a Christian, attends church, prays regularly, believes in God and the saints and the whole structure of Christian theology. But she also understands that her role at births goes beyond the merely physical. She's not just catching babies. She's welcoming souls into the world. She's assisting at the moment of creation, when God brings new life into being. This makes her work sacred. makes her, in some sense, a religious figure, even though she has no official church position. Before every birth, Agnes prays. She prays to God for a safe delivery. She prays to the Virgin Mary, who understands the experience of giving birth, who can sympathize with laboring mothers. She prays to Saint Margaret, the patron saint of childbirth, asking for her intercession and protection. These prayers aren't just for show, aren't just ritual. They're genuine expressions of faith, genuine requests for divine assistance in the dangerous work ahead. She also says prayers during labor, especially if complications arise. When a labor is going badly, when the mother is in terrible pain or the baby seems stuck or there's dangerous bleeding, Agnes prays aloud, asking for God's help, invoking the saints, performing a kind of spiritual as well as medical intervention. The other women in the room often join in, everyone praying together, creating a collective plea for divine assistance. And there's a specific prayer that Agnes knows, a prayer that's only for midwives, only for the moment when a baby is being born. As the baby crowns, as the head emerges, Agnes says this prayer, blessing the child's entry into the world, asking God to protect this new soul, welcoming the baby on behalf of the community and the church. This prayer, which she learned from the midwife who trained her, and which has been passed down through generations of midwives, makes her feel connected to all the midwives who came before, all the women who stood at this threshold and said these same words. When the baby is born, Agnes performs the first religious ritual of its life. She makes sure the baby is breathing, that it's going to survive those first crucial minutes. And then, once she's certain the baby is viable, she performs a kind of emergency baptism. This isn't the full church baptism that will come later, but it's a blessing, a welcoming, a marking of the child as Christian. She makes the sign of the cross on the baby's forehead, says a quick prayer, ensures that if this baby dies in the next few hours or days before proper baptism can be performed, it will still be counted among the saved. This emergency baptism is particularly important if the baby is weak or sickly, if it seems unlikely to survive long enough for the priest to come and perform proper baptism. In medieval theology, unbaptized babies couldn't go to heaven, couldn't be buried in consecrated ground, were in spiritual limbo forever. Agnes, by performing this emergency blessing, saves babies from that terrible fate. She ensures that even babies who only live for minutes are welcomed into the Christian community, are marked as souls rather than just flesh. If a baby is born dead, if it emerges from the mother already lifeless, Agnes has another sacred duty. She baptizes the dead baby anyway, performs the ritual even though the child never took a breath, because the soul might still be present, might still need this blessing. And she comforts the mother, tells her that her baby's soul is with God, that even though the child never lived in this world, it has life in the next. This spiritual comfort is as important as any medical care Agnes provides. There's also a darker aspect to Agnes's spiritual role, one that's uncomfortable but real. If a mother dies in childbirth, which happens despite Agnes's best efforts, Agnes is the one who prepares the body. She washes the dead woman, says prayers over her, ensures that she's treated with dignity and respect. She's present at death as well as at birth, witness to both sides of the threshold, keeper of the sacred mysteries of both beginning and ending. And there are superstitions and beliefs surrounding Agnes's role that go beyond official Christian doctrine. Many people believe that midwives have a kind of second sight, an ability to see things that ordinary people can't see. They believe Agnes can tell just by looking at a pregnant woman whether the baby will be a boy or girl. They believe she can predict whether a delivery will be easy or hard. They believe she has intuitive knowledge that comes from somewhere beyond the merely human. Agnes doesn't necessarily believe all of this herself, but she doesn't entirely disbelieve it either. She knows that sometimes she does seem to know things she can't logically know. That sometimes her intuition tells her something is wrong before there are any physical signs. That sometimes she senses things about a birth that turn out to be true even though she couldn't have known them rationally. Maybe this is just experience, pattern recognition developed over decades of practice. Or maybe there is something more, some connection to spiritual realms that comes with standing at the threshold of life so many times. People in the community treat Agnes with a kind of awe that goes beyond simple respect for her medical skills. They're a little afraid of her, if we're honest. She has knowledge they don't have, power they don't possess, a relationship with the mysteries of life and death that sets her apart. Children are taught to be respectful to Agnes. Men tip their hats when she passes. Even people of higher social status treat her with a certain deference, recognizing that, in the realm of birth and death, she has authority that transcends social hierarchies. There's also a belief that it's unlucky to offend a midwife, that doing so might bring bad fortune, might cause problems during your own children's births, might anger the spirits or forces that midwives are connected to. This belief, which exists alongside official Christian theology, gives Agnes a kind of protection. People are careful around her, cautious about insulting or disrespecting her, because they believe there might be consequences, beyond just making an enemy of someone useful. Agnes lives in this dual reality, this space between official Christian doctrine and older folk beliefs, between the physical and the spiritual, between the rational and the mysterious. She's a Christian who prays to saints, but she also knows folk charms and blessings that predate Christianity. She uses medical techniques based on observation and experience, but she also believes in spiritual forces that can help or hinder a birth. She's practical and mystical at the same time, grounded in physical reality, while also recognizing dimensions of experience that go beyond the purely physical. When Agnes enters a birthing chamber, she brings all of this with her. Her medical knowledge, yes, but also her spiritual authority, her connection to forces beyond the merely human, her role as intermediary between this world and the next. The laboring woman and her attendants don't just see a skilled practitioner. They see someone with power, someone connected to the deep mysteries of existence, someone who stands at the gateway between life and death and helps souls cross from one side to the other. And Agnes, carrying the weight of this enormous responsibility, does her best to be worthy of the trust placed in her, to honor the sacred nature of her role, to serve both the physical and spiritual needs of the women and babies who depend on her. Agnes's role as midwife gives her power and influence that extends far beyond the birthing chamber. She's not just someone who catches babies. She's a counselor, an advisor, a keeper of secrets, someone whose opinion matters in ways that transcend her official role. Let me tell you about the social and political power that came with being a midwife in medieval society. Power that's invisible in most history books, but that was very real to the people who lived it. First, consider this. Agnes has attended the births of nearly everyone in her town who's under 30 years old. She was there when they entered the world, was the first person to hold them, was the one who ensured they took their first breath. This creates a relationship, a bond, that lasts throughout people's lives. These people, now grown, still remember that Agnes brought them into the world. They feel a connection to her, a debt of gratitude, a sense that she's somehow special in their lives. More importantly, Agnes knows things about families that no one else knows, secrets that were revealed in the birthing chamber and that she's sworn to keep. She knows which babies were born prematurely, raising questions about conception dates and implying that perhaps the marriage happened because pregnancy was already evident. She knows which wealthy merchant's wife had a lover because the baby looks nothing like the husband. She knows which noble family's heir might not be legitimate. She knows about births that were hidden, babies born to unmarried women and given away in secret. This knowledge is power, tremendous power, though Agnes would never explicitly use it as leverage or blackmail. That would be unthinkable, would violate her sacred duty as midwife. But people know she knows things, and this creates a dynamic where people are very careful not to offend her, very eager to stay on her good side. A midwife who decided to talk, who revealed the secrets she'd learned in birthing chambers, could destroy reputations, could call into question inheritances and legitimacy, could tear apart families. Agnes also serves as an advisor on matters related to pregnancy, fertility, and women's health more broadly. When a couple can't conceive, they come to Agnes asking for help. She provides herbs and advice, suggests timing and positions that might increase the chances of pregnancy. When a pregnancy ends in miscarriage, Agnes comforts the woman and provides medical care to ensure she recovers. When a woman wants to prevent or delay pregnancy, she might, very cautiously, very secretly, ask Agnes for advice, though this is dangerous territory in a Christian society that officially condemns any interference with reproduction. Young women about to be married often come to Agnes with questions about sex and reproduction that they can't ask anyone else. Their mothers might be too embarrassed to explain or might only offer vague warnings. Agnes provides actual information, practical knowledge about what to expect on the wedding night and in the marriage bed, about how pregnancy happens, about what childbirth will be like. This education is invaluable, helps prepare young women for the realities of married life in ways that nothing else can. Agnes also has surprising influence in marital disputes and family conflicts. When a husband and wife are fighting about sexual matters, about pregnancy, about childcare, they might ask Agnes to mediate. Her opinion carries weight because she's the expert, because she knows about these matters in ways that no one else does. She can tell a husband that his demands are unreasonable, that his wife needs more time to recover from childbirth, that he's being unfair. And he'll listen, because Agnes speaks with authority that comes from knowledge and experience. In legal matters, too, Agnes sometimes plays a role. In cases of disputed paternity, her testimony might be sought. She can testify about whether a birth happened at a time consistent with claimed conception dates. She can offer opinions about whether a baby's appearance is consistent with claimed parentage. Courts and officials recognize her expertise and defer to her judgment in these matters. There's also the matter of infant death and infanticide, a dark reality of medieval life. Babies died frequently from natural causes, from illness, from complications of birth. But sometimes babies also died from neglect or deliberate killing, particularly unwanted babies born to poor families or to unmarried women. Agnes, as the person who attends births and sees new babies, is often the one who must judge whether a baby's death was natural or suspicious. Her testimony can determine whether a death is ruled an accident or a crime, whether a mother is charged with infanticide or pitied for her loss. This is an enormous responsibility, and one that Agnes takes very seriously. She's seen enough infant deaths to know the difference between natural death and suspicious death. She knows the signs of suffocation, of exposure, of deliberate harm. And she has to make judgments about whether to report her suspicions, whether to accuse a desperate woman of murder, whether to pursue justice or show mercy. These are terrible decisions, and Agnes makes them as best she can, trying to balance justice with compassion, law with understanding of the impossible situations some women face. Agnes's house is a gathering place for women in ways that go beyond her midwifery practice. Women come to her for advice about all sorts of problems, not just medical ones. A woman whose husband beats her might come to Agnes asking what to do. A woman worried about her aging parents might seek Agnes's counsel. A woman dealing with difficult in-laws might ask for advice. Agnes, with her years of experience and her position of respect in the community, becomes a kind of unofficial counselor for women's problems. She's also a source of gossip and news, though the discretion required by her profession means she's careful about what she shares. Women come to her house to talk, to share information, to discuss community events and family dramas. Agnes's home becomes a kind of informal women's center, a place where female social networks are maintained and strengthened. Her influence extends to matters of social custom and tradition too. Agnes knows all the traditional practices surrounding birth, the rituals and customs that have been followed for generations. When there's a question about how things should be done, about what's proper and traditional, people ask Agnes. Should the new mother be churched before or after the baby's baptism? How long should a woman stay in confinement after giving birth? What gifts are appropriate for a new baby? Agnes knows all these things, and her answers become authoritative. With wealthy families, Agnes's influence is even more pronounced. When she's called to attend the birth of a noble or merchant's child, she enters spaces that ordinary people never see, participates in events that shape the community's future. The children she delivers might grow up to be town leaders, might inherit businesses or lands, might marry into powerful families. And Agnes was there at their beginning, knows them from their first moment in the world. These wealthy families pay Agnes well, providing fees that are substantial by medieval standards. But they also give her access, connections, opportunities that enhance her social position. She becomes someone who moves between social classes, who is welcomed in both the homes of the wealthy and the cottages of the poor, who can speak to nobles and peasants alike with the authority that comes from her role. Sometimes nobles or wealthy merchants seek her advice on matters beyond childbirth. They know she's wise, that she's seen much of human nature in the intimacy of birthing chambers, that she has insights into people and relationships that come from her unique position. They might ask her opinion about a daughter's proposed marriage, about whether a young woman seems healthy enough for childbearing, about family planning and inheritance matters. All of this power, this influence, this access to secrets, and this role as counselor and authority figure, it comes from being a midwife. Agnes wields power that isn't based on wealth or noble birth or official position. It's power that comes from knowledge, from being present at life's most important moments, from serving a role that's absolutely essential and that only she and a few other midwives can fill. And she uses this power carefully, thoughtfully, always aware of the responsibility it brings, always trying to serve the women and families who depend on her with integrity and compassion. Perhaps the most important source of Agnes's power, and certainly the most ethically demanding aspect of her role, is the absolute trust placed in her to keep secrets. What happens in the birthing chamber stays in the birthing chamber. This isn't just a nice principle, it's an iron law of midwifery, a sacred duty that Agnes takes as seriously as any religious vow. Let me tell you about the secrets Agnes keeps, and what it means to bear that burden. The birthing chamber sees people at their most vulnerable, most exposed, most honest. Pain strips away pretense and social performance. Women in labor can't maintain the careful facades they present to the world. They scream, they curse, they say things they'd never say in normal circumstances. They reveal truths about their fears, their relationships, their histories. And Agnes hears all of it, witnesses all of it, and must keep absolutely silent about what she's seen and heard. Sometimes the secrets are about paternity. A baby is born who clearly doesn't resemble the mother's husband, who has features that match someone else the mother knows, someone she shouldn't have been intimate with. Agnes sees this, understands immediately what it means, and says nothing. She never comments, never hints, never uses this knowledge. The secret is safe with her, locked away forever. The child will be raised as the husband's, inheritance will pass as expected, and no one will know except Agnes and perhaps the mother herself. Sometimes the secrets are about violence and abuse. A woman comes to Agnes already in labor, and Agnes sees bruises, sees marks that clearly come from beatings. The woman might not say anything, might try to hide the evidence, but Agnes sees. She knows this woman is being abused by her husband or someone else in her household. And Agnes has to navigate this carefully, has to provide care without judgment, has to perhaps gently suggest that the woman doesn't have to endure this, that there might be help available. But she can't force the issue, can't report what she sees without the woman's permission, can't violate the trust that keeps women willing to call her when they need help. Sometimes the secrets are about babies born dead or deformed, babies who never had a chance at life. Families of wealth and status, families who need an heir or who can't afford the shame of a failed pregnancy, might pressure Agnes to keep such births quiet. She might be asked to dispose of a stillborn baby discreetly, to tell people the mother miscarried early rather than going through full labor. These requests put Agnes in difficult positions, forcing her to balance her duty to truth with her duty to the families she serves. Sometimes the secrets are about women who've tried to end pregnancies themselves, who've taken herbs or done other things to cause miscarriage. When these women come to Agnes, suffering from complications, she provides care without moral judgment, treats the bleeding or infection without asking too many questions about how it started. She knows that women have reasons, desperate reasons sometimes, for not wanting to continue a pregnancy. Her job isn't to judge, it's to help, to heal, to save lives when she can. Agnes also keeps secrets about women's bodies and functions that women themselves might be embarrassed about. Some women have conditions, prolapsed uteruses or fistulas or other problems that they're deeply ashamed of. Agnes treats these conditions as matter-of-factly as possible, provides care and advice, and never breathes a word to anyone else. The woman's dignity is protected by Agnes's silence. The secrets extend to intimate details of marital relationships too. Women in labor sometimes say things about their husbands, complaints or revelations about their sexual relationships, about problems in their marriages, about unhappiness or disappointment, or sometimes about joy and love. Agnes hears all of this uncensored truth that emerges in moments of pain and vulnerability, and keeps it all confidential. She never gossips, never shares these intimate details, never uses what she knows to make herself seem important or knowledgeable. This discretion, this absolute reliability about keeping secrets, is what makes women willing to call Agnes when they need her. They know that whatever happens, whatever is said or seen or done in the birthing chamber, Agnes won't talk about it. They can be completely vulnerable with her, can drop all pretense, can be honest about their fears and their circumstances, and know that their confidences are safe. But keeping all these secrets, carrying all this knowledge that she can never share, it's a burden. Agnes knows things about her community that weigh on her. She knows which marriages are unhappy. She knows which children aren't legitimate. She knows which women have suffered miscarriages or stillbirths that no one else knows about. She knows about violence, about adultery, about deception and pain and secrets that people would be devastated to have revealed. And she has to live with this knowledge alone. She can't talk about it with her husband, if she has one. She can't discuss it with friends. She can't process or share the emotional weight of these secrets. She carries them in silence, and that silence is part of the price of being a midwife. It's isolating in a way, knowing so much about so many people and being unable to ever talk about any of it. There's also the legal dimension to consider. Agnes's testimony carries weight in legal matters precisely because she's known to be trustworthy and discreet. If she's called to testify about a birth or about a woman's reproductive history, courts and officials know they can trust what she says. But this also means she has to be very careful about what she's willing to testify to, has to balance her legal obligations with her duty to her patient's privacy. In some cases, Agnes's secrets protect the innocent. She might know that a woman accused of adultery is actually innocent, that the timeline of pregnancy is consistent with marital relations rather than an affair. Her testimony can save a woman's reputation or even her life. But she can only testify if she's called, can't volunteer information even to help, because that would violate the confidentiality that's central to her role. In other cases, Agnes's secrets protect the guilty. She might know that a man claiming to be a baby's father isn't, or that a woman has given birth to a child she's claiming isn't hers. But unless she's specifically asked and has a legal obligation to answer, she remains silent. It's not her job to police morality or expose deception. It's her job to help women through childbirth and keep their confidences. This neutrality, this refusal to judge or to use her knowledge for anything except helping the women she serves, is part of what makes Agnes trusted and effective. Women know that no matter what their circumstances, no matter what secrets they have or what they've done, Agnes will help them without judgment and will keep their secrets safe. This non-judgmental care is revolutionary in a way, in a society that's usually very judgmental about women's sexual and reproductive behavior. Agnes has been offered money for secrets more than once. People want to know things, want confirmation of suspicions, want information they can use for various purposes. But Agnes always refuses, always maintains her silence, even when refusing costs her financially or socially. Her integrity, her reliability, her absolute commitment to confidentiality, these are more valuable than any payment someone might offer. As Agnes sits by her fire at night, thinking about all the births she's attended, all the women she's helped, she's also thinking about all the secrets she carries. Each one is a burden, but also a trust, something given to her that she must protect. She's the keeper of her community's most intimate knowledge, the guardian of truths that could destroy lives if revealed. And she'll carry these secrets to her grave, will never betray the trust that's been placed in her. This is the price and the privilege of being a midwife. And Agnes bears it willingly, knowing that her silence is what allows women to seek her help, what makes it possible for her to do the sacred work she's been called to do. Now let's talk about the physical reality of Agnes's work, the literal life and death struggles that happen in birthing chambers, the moments when her skill and experience are all that stand between life and death for mother and baby. Because for all the spiritual and social dimensions we've discussed, Agnes's most important job is fundamentally practical. keeping women and babies alive through one of the most dangerous events human bodies can experience. Childbirth in medieval times is brutally dangerous. Modern statistics from societies without medical intervention suggest that maybe 1 in 100 births results in the mother's death, and infant mortality is even higher. Agnes knows these statistics intimately, not as numbers, but as faces, as women she's tried to save, as babies she's held who never took a breath. She's lost patients despite her best efforts, and those losses haunt her, drive her to be better, to learn more, to never make the same mistake twice if she can help it. The most common cause of maternal death is bleeding, hemorrhage that happens either during delivery or in the hours afterward when the uterus fails to contract properly. Agnes is constantly vigilant for signs of excessive bleeding, constantly monitoring the amount of blood loss, constantly ready to intervene. When bleeding starts to get heavy, her heart races, even as her hands stay calm and steady, because she knows she might only have minutes to stop it before the mother bleeds to death. Her first intervention is always massage, pressing down firmly on the mother's abdomen, stimulating the uterus to contract. A contracted uterus clamps down on the blood vessels that fed the placenta, stops the bleeding naturally. Agnes's hands are strong from years of this work, and she knows exactly how much pressure to apply, how to find the uterus through the abdominal wall, how to manipulate it to encourage contraction. If massage doesn't work quickly enough, Agnes uses herbs. She has a tincture of ergot, that powerful fungal compound that causes intense uterine contractions. She measures it carefully, gives just enough to make the uterus contract without causing other problems. Too much ergot can cause gangrene, can make the woman desperately ill, but just the right amount can save her life by stopping hemorrhage. This is Agnes's skill, this ability to judge dosages, to know when to use powerful and dangerous remedies, and exactly how much to use. Sometimes she has to manually remove retained placental tissue, reaching into the uterus with her hand, feeling for pieces of placenta that haven't delivered, pulling them out piece by piece. This is incredibly painful for the mother, dangerous because it can cause more bleeding or introduce infection. But sometimes it's the only way to stop hemorrhaging. Agnes does this when she must, trying to be as quick and gentle as possible, while also being thorough, making sure she's gotten everything out that needs to come out. Another major danger is infection, what they called childbed fever. What we now know is often caused by bacteria introduced during birth or in the hours afterward. Agnes doesn't know about bacteria, doesn't understand the mechanism of infection, but she knows cleanliness helps. She washes her hands before examining women, uses clean cloths, boils water for cleaning wounds. These practices, which she learned from other midwives and which have been passed down through generations, actually do help prevent infection, even though the scientific rationale wasn't understood. When a woman develops fever after birth, Agnes treats it with cooling herbs, with willow bark tea to bring down temperature, with prayers and vigilance. Sometimes the fever passes and the woman recovers. Sometimes it doesn't, and Agnes can only watch helplessly as infection spreads, as the woman weakens and eventually dies. These deaths are particularly hard because they happen days after what seemed like a successful birth, turning joy into tragedy, taking mothers away from their newborn babies. Obstructed labor, where the baby simply can't pass through the pelvis, is another major danger. Agnes can usually tell early whether the baby and pelvis are well matched, can assess whether delivery will be straightforward or difficult. If the baby seems too large or the pelvis too small, she knows there's trouble ahead. She tries positioning changes, has the mother squat or stand or get on hands and knees, trying to find a position that gives the baby the best chance to pass through. She uses techniques to help ease the baby through, massaging the perineum with oil, supporting the tissue, using her hands to guide the baby's head and shoulders, trying to minimize trauma to both mother and baby. Sometimes she has to make the decision to cut the perineum deliberately to make more room for the baby, to prevent worse tearing. This controlled cutting, which she does with a sharp knife, is painful and frightening, but sometimes necessary.
If the baby is stuck with a shoulder lodged behind the mother's pubic bone, a situation that can kill the baby within minutes from lack of oxygen, Agnes knows specific maneuvers. She pushes the mother's knees up toward her chest, changing the angle of the pelvis. She reaches in and tries to manually rotate the baby's shoulders. She presses on the mother's abdomen in specific ways. These techniques, developed through centuries of midwifery practice, can free a stuck baby and save its life. Sometimes babies are positioned impossibly, transverse across the uterus or with the umbilical cord wrapped tightly around the neck. Sometimes there are twins when only one was expected. Sometimes babies are simply too large to be born naturally. In these situations, Agnes does everything she can, tries every technique she knows. But sometimes there's nothing that will work, nothing that will save both mother and baby. Sometimes nothing that will save either one. These are the births that stay with Agnes forever, the ones where she has to make impossible choices, or where all choices lead to tragedy. A baby that has to be sacrificed to save the mother's life. A mother who dies despite everything Agnes can do. Twins, where one must be delivered dead to save the other. These tragedies are part of midwifery, the dark side of standing at the threshold of life, and Agnes carries each one with her. But there are also miraculous saves, births that seemed hopeless that Agnes manages to rescue through skill and experience and sheer determination. A mother bleeding to death, whose bleeding Agnes manages to stop with seconds to spare. A baby born not breathing, who Agnes manages to revive with stimulation and clearing of airways. A terribly difficult delivery that Agnes navigates through hours of patient work, bringing both mother and baby through alive, when everyone thought at least one would die. These successes, these lives saved, these mothers and babies who survive because of Agnes's skill, these are what sustain her through the difficult parts of her work. Every baby she successfully delivers, every mother who survives birth, is a victory. She's stood at the threshold of death and guided someone back to life. She's fought against the forces that would claim mother or baby, and won. These victories are precious, meaningful. The reason she does this exhausting and heartbreaking work. Agnes knows that sometimes she's all that stands between a woman and death. In those moments of crisis, when bleeding won't stop or a baby won't come or complications cascade faster than seems possible, Agnes is the only hope. Her knowledge, her experience, her steady hands and calm presence. These are literally the difference between life and death. And she rises to meet that responsibility again and again, birth after birth, emergency after emergency, fighting for lives with everything she has. As she washes blood from her hands after a particularly difficult birth, both mother and baby alive against considerable odds, Agnes feels the exhaustion of the fight, but also the satisfaction of victory. Another life saved, another death cheated, another family that will remain intact because of her skill and her determination to never give up, never stop trying, never accept defeat as long as there's any possibility of saving a life. This is her calling, this fight against death, and she'll fight it as long as she has strength to do so. One of the most remarkable aspects of Agnes's position is how it allows her to cross social boundaries that are normally rigid and unbreachable. In medieval society, class divisions are stark and carefully maintained. Nobles don't mix with peasants. Merchants keep separate from laborers. Everyone knows their place and stays in it. But Agnes, because of her role as midwife, moves freely between all these worlds, entering spaces and participating in events that would be closed to someone of her actual social status.
Agnes herself comes from fairly modest origins, a craftsman's family perhaps, certainly not nobility or wealth. By birth and normal social position, she should have a very limited sphere, should interact primarily with people of similar status, should never enter the homes of the wealthy or powerful. But, as a midwife, these normal rules don't apply to her. When a noble lady goes into labor, Agnes is summoned to the manor house or castle, is brought into private chambers where even male relatives aren't allowed, is given access to the most intimate family matters. She's attended births in castles, in manor houses, in wealthy merchants' homes, in craftsmen's comfortable houses, in peasants' cottages, and in hovels where poverty is grinding and absolute. She's caught babies who will grow up to inherit titles and vast estates, and babies who will never know anything but hard labor and subsistence living. And she treats them all the same, provides the same level of care to the noble lady and the peasant woman, because to Agnes, every birth is sacred, every mother deserves her best effort, every baby is equally precious. This access to different social levels gives Agnes a unique perspective on her society. She sees how the wealthy live, sees their private spaces and their family dynamics in ways few people ever do. She sees their humanity, their vulnerability, the fact that pain and fear in childbirth are the same whether you're noble or peasant. She sees that a duchess in labor cries out just like any other woman. But wealth and status provide no protection against the dangers and pain of giving birth. She also sees the resources available to different classes. The noble lady labors in a warm, comfortable room with soft bedding and plenty of attendants. She has access to expensive herbs and remedies, to wine and good food during the lying-in period, to servants who will care for her and the baby. The peasant woman labors on a straw mattress in a drafty cottage, might have only Agnes and perhaps one female relative to help, has access only to the most basic herbs and remedies, will be back to work within days of giving birth, regardless of how she feels. These differences in resources affect outcomes. Wealthy women have better nutrition during pregnancy, which means healthier babies and easier births. They can afford to rest after delivery, to hire wet nurses if needed, to have help with household work. Poor women are often malnourished, exhausted from heavy labor during pregnancy, forced back to work before they've healed. The wealth gap is literally a life and death matter, and Agnes sees this more clearly than almost anyone. But despite these differences in circumstances, Agnes is struck by the similarities too. Love for a new baby is the same across classes. Fear of death in childbirth is universal. The relief when both mother and baby survive is identical, whether the baby is heir to an estate or destined for a life of labor. The fundamental human experiences of birth transcend social divisions, and Agnes witnesses this transcendence repeatedly. Her ability to move between social levels also gives Agnes unusual freedom and mobility. In an era when women's movement is often restricted, when women are supposed to stay close to home and only venture out for specific approved purposes, Agnes travels constantly. She's called to births in neighboring villages, in distant estates, sometimes quite far from her own home. She travels at night, travels alone sometimes, travels in all weather and all seasons. This mobility is unusual and valuable, gives her independence that most women don't have. People of all social levels treat Agnes with a certain respect that transcends her actual class position. Yes, wealthy patrons are condescending sometimes, remind her of her place in subtle or not so subtle ways. But they also need her, depend on her, can't give birth without her.
This creates a dynamic where even someone who's socially superior to Agnes has to treat her well, has to ensure she's willing to come when called, has to maintain a relationship that works. Agnes has delivered babies who've grown up to be knights, merchants, guild masters, church officials, wealthy landowners. These people remember that she brought them into the world, feel a connection to her that persists despite class differences. Sometimes these connections prove useful. Sometimes former babies, now grown to positions of power, are willing to help Agnes in various ways, provide her with opportunities or protections or considerations that wouldn't normally be available to someone of her class. She's also present at family dramas that would normally be very private. She's in the room when illegitimate heirs are born, when family members argue about inheritances and legitimacy, when secrets are revealed or created. She hears conversations about politics and power that she'd never be privy to in normal circumstances. She becomes an inadvertent witness to history, to the events and decisions that shape her community, all because her presence at births gives her access to moments when people's guards are down. The payment Agnes receives varies wildly by social class too. A wealthy family might pay her very generously, might give her money plus gifts of cloth or food or other valuable goods. A poor family might give her only a chicken or some eggs or a small amount of grain, all they can afford. Agnes accepts whatever payment is offered without complaint, understanding that everyone gives what they can. She's not in this work for wealth anyway. If she wanted to be wealthy, she'd have chosen a different path. But the varied payments mean Agnes actually does fairly well financially overall. The few wealthy births she attends each year provide substantial income, while the many poor births provide modest payment that accumulates. She's not rich, but she's comfortable, better off than many women of her base social class, able to support herself independently, which is remarkable for a medieval woman. This financial independence, combined with the respect her profession commands and the social mobility it allows, makes Agnes unusual. She's a woman with her own income, her own professional identity, her own authority and expertise. She's not primarily defined by her relationship to a man, not just someone's wife or daughter or sister. She's Agnes the midwife, known and respected in her own right. This independence is rare for medieval women and is one of the benefits of her profession. As Agnes moves from a noble lady's comfortable lying-in chamber to a peasant cottage where the next birth awaits, she reflects on the strange position she occupies. She belongs fully to no social class, moves between them all, is both insider and outsider everywhere. It's isolating sometimes, not quite fitting anywhere. But it's also freeing, this ability to cross boundaries, to see life from multiple perspectives, to understand her society in ways that most people, trapped within their class positions, never can. She's a bridge between worlds, and that's fitting for someone whose primary role is bridging the worlds of life and death,
of the spiritual and physical, of the possible and the impossible. Agnes's work doesn't end when the baby is born. In fact, some of her most important work happens in the days and weeks after delivery, during what's called the lying-in period or the confinement, traditionally about 40 days, when the new mother is supposed to rest and recover. Let me tell you about the postpartum care Agnes provides, because this aspect of medieval midwifery is crucial but often overlooked. Immediately after birth, once Agnes is satisfied that the placenta has been delivered completely and the bleeding is under control, she turns her attention to making both mother and baby comfortable. She cleans the mother, changes the bedding that's soaked with blood and fluids, helps her into a clean nightgown. She makes sure the mother is warm, that she has something to drink, that she's positioned comfortably. These simple acts of care, of treating the mother's physical comfort as important, are part of Agnes's role. She examines the baby thoroughly, checking for any problems that weren't obvious in the immediate moments after birth. She looks at the baby's color, its breathing, its muscle tone. She checks for birthmarks or unusual features. She counts fingers and toes carefully. She examines the mouth for cleft palate. She assesses whether the baby seems healthy and strong, or whether there might be problems ahead. Then she instructs the mother on breastfeeding, helps position the baby at the breast, shows the mother how to help the baby latch properly. This isn't always easy, especially for first-time mothers who've never breastfed before. Agnes is patient, demonstrating and repositioning and encouraging, until mother and baby figure it out together. Successful breastfeeding is crucial for the baby's survival, so Agnes invests whatever time is necessary to get it established. She also prepares special foods and drinks for the new mother. There's a traditional beverage called caudle, made from warm ale or wine mixed with eggs, sugar and spices. This rich, nourishing drink is believed to help restore the mother's strength, to help her produce milk, to speed recovery. Agnes makes this herself, or instructs family members on how to prepare it, ensures the mother drinks it regularly during the first days after birth. She prepares herbal baths for the mother, warm water infused with healing herbs like comfrey and calendula. The mother sits in this warm bath, which soothes sore tissues, helps prevent infection, promotes healing. Agnes supervises these baths, makes sure the water isn't too hot, helps the mother in and out, maintains the modesty and dignity that's so important in this intimate care. She also does massage, gently massaging the mother's abdomen to help the uterus contract back to its normal size, massaging her legs to help prevent blood clots, massaging her back to ease the aches that come from labor. Agnes's hands are skilled and strong, and her massage provides both physical benefit and emotional comfort. The human touch, the gentle care, helps the mother feel cared for and valued during this vulnerable time. Agnes visits daily for at least the first week after birth, sometimes twice daily if she's concerned about anything. She checks the mother's bleeding, makes sure it's tapering off normally rather than continuing too heavy. She checks for signs of fever or infection. She examines any tears or cuts that happened during delivery, makes sure they're healing properly. She asks about pain, about how the mother is feeling emotionally, about whether breastfeeding is going well. She also checks the baby at each visit, watches for signs of jaundice or feeding problems, or anything else that might indicate trouble. She examines the umbilical stump, makes sure it's drying and healing properly. She weighs the baby subjectively, holds it, and assesses whether it feels heavier or lighter than at birth, whether it's gaining weight as it should. She watches how alert the baby is, how it moves, whether it seems vigorous and healthy. During this postpartum period, Agnes also provides emotional support that's as important as the physical care.
New mothers often experience intense emotions, a combination of joy and fear and exhaustion, and sometimes what we'd now recognize as postpartum depression. Agnes recognizes these emotional states, has seen them many times before, knows they're normal, even if frightening. She reassures mothers that what they're feeling is common, that it will pass, that they're not failing or going crazy. She listens when mothers want to talk about their birth experience, helps them process what happened, validates their feelings about what was often a traumatic event. She answers questions about what's normal in recovery, what symptoms are concerning versus which are expected. She provides the kind of ongoing education and support that helps new mothers navigate those overwhelming first weeks. Agnes also mediates between the new mother and her family, particularly the mother-in-law or the woman's own mother. These relationships can be fraught with tension, with different ideas about how to care for the baby, about what the new mother should or shouldn't be doing. Agnes, as the authority on childbirth and infant care, can settle disputes, can tell overbearing relatives to back off, or can gently correct a new mother who's doing something unhelpful. Her word carries weight, helps maintain peace during a stressful time. She prepares the mother for the churching ceremony, a religious ritual that happens about 40 days after birth, when the mother is considered purified and can return to church and normal social activities. Agnes explains what will happen in this ceremony, helps the mother prepare, sometimes even accompanies her to church for the churching. During the lying-in period, Agnes also performs the baby's first bath, ceremonially, usually about a week after birth. This is a significant ritual, not just washing, but a kind of welcoming ceremony. Agnes washes the baby with specially prepared herbal water, prayers and blessings accompanying the washing. This first bath is attended by female relatives and friends, becomes a social occasion, a celebration that the baby has survived the dangerous first week of life. She also advises on infant care beyond just breastfeeding, how to swaddle the baby, how to tell when it's too hot or cold, how to soothe a crying baby, how to recognize when the baby is sick versus just fussy. She teaches about normal infant development, what to expect in the coming weeks and months. She helps prepare new mothers for the realities of caring for an infant, knowledge that's invaluable for women who've never been around babies before. If problems arise during the postpartum period, Agnes is the one who responds. If the mother develops a fever, Agnes treats it with herbs and cool compresses, monitors it carefully for signs that it's worsening. If the baby isn't feeding well, she troubleshoots the problem, tries different positions and techniques. If the mother is bleeding too much, she intervenes to stop it. She's the first line of defense against all the things that can go wrong in those dangerous weeks after birth. She also provides practical help, not just medical care. She might prepare meals for the family if the mother's relatives aren't available to do so. She might help with laundry or cleaning, might take care of older children for a few hours. She does whatever needs doing to support the new mother's recovery and the family's adjustment to a new baby. This extended postpartum care is as important as the actual delivery, maybe more important, because so many maternal deaths happen in the days and weeks after birth rather than during labor itself. Agnes's vigilance during this period, her daily visits and careful monitoring, her quick responses to problems, saves lives that might otherwise be lost to infection or hemorrhage or other postpartum complications. As Agnes makes her final postpartum visit around 6 weeks after birth, checking one last time that mother and baby are both thriving, she feels satisfaction that another family has successfully navigated the dangerous period of childbirth and early infancy. The mother is healed, the baby is growing. Both are healthy. Agnes's work here is complete. She's guided them not just through birth, but through the crucial recovery period, has ensured that both mother and baby emerged safely from the most dangerous weeks.
And now she's ready to move on to the next birth, the next family, the next opportunity to provide this crucial care that makes the difference between survival and tragedy. As Agnes grows older, she becomes aware of changes happening in her world, changes that threaten the traditional practice of midwifery and the role that women like her have held for centuries. Let me tell you about these changes, about the tensions that arose as male physicians began to enter the birthing chamber, and as the knowledge that had been women's domain for millennia started to be challenged and changed. It starts subtly, with whispers about new ideas, new approaches to medicine that are being developed in universities where only men can study. Physicians, trained in these universities, are beginning to claim expertise in all areas of medicine, including childbirth. They're writing books about obstetrics, codifying knowledge in Latin that most women can't read, creating formal medical theory that positions them as authorities superior to midwives with their experiential knowledge. At first, this doesn't affect Agnes much. Physicians are rare, expensive, available only to the very wealthy. Ordinary people continue to rely on midwives as they always have. But gradually, some wealthy families begin calling physicians for difficult births, bringing in these men with their university training to handle complications. And this creates tension, because the birthing chamber has always been exclusively female space, and now men are entering, claiming authority, sometimes overruling the midwives who've managed births for generations. Agnes experiences this herself when attending a wealthy merchant's wife whose labor is difficult. The family, worried because the birth isn't progressing normally, calls in a physician. This man arrives with his books and his instruments and his university-trained confidence, and immediately starts giving orders, telling Agnes what to do in her own domain. He's read about childbirth in books, but has never actually attended a birth before, while Agnes has attended hundreds. But he assumes authority based on his formal education and his gender. The physician wants to try interventions that Agnes knows from experience are dangerous. He's read about techniques in books, theoretical approaches that sound good on paper, but that Agnes knows can harm or kill. She tries to object, to share her experience, but he dismisses her concerns. She's just a midwife, just a woman with no formal education. What could she possibly know compared to his university training? The situation becomes tense. Agnes has to decide whether to defer to this physician's authority or to stand her ground based on her experience. It's a difficult position because arguing with him could cost her reputation, could lead to accusations that she's difficult or insubordinate. But following his dangerous suggestions could harm or kill her patient. She chooses to protect her patient, firmly but respectfully opposing the physician's most dangerous suggestions, using her knowledge and experience to guide the birth despite his interference. In this case, the birth succeeds. Both mother and baby survive. But Agnes knows it was despite the physician's interference, not because of it. And she's troubled by the implications of this encounter. If wealthy families start routinely calling physicians for births, if men with book learning but no practical experience start claiming authority over childbirth, what happens to midwives and their centuries of accumulated knowledge? There's also a darker development happening, one that frightens Agnes more than the competition from physicians. Some midwives, particularly those known for their extensive knowledge of herbs and healing, are being accused of witchcraft. The church and secular authorities are becoming increasingly suspicious of women with too much knowledge. women who seem to have power over life and death, women whose herbal remedies seem too effective to be entirely natural. Agnes hears stories from other regions, terrible stories about midwives being arrested, being tried for witchcraft, being executed. The accusations often focus on their herbal knowledge, claiming that they're using demonic power rather than natural remedies. Or they accuse midwives of killing babies or mothers deliberately, of causing stillbirths through curses or evil magic. These accusations are usually false, based on fear and superstition rather than evidence, but they're deadly nonetheless. Agnes becomes more cautious, more careful about how she presents her knowledge. She emphasizes that all her remedies are gifts from God, that any success she has is through divine providence, that she's just a humble servant doing her best to help. She distances herself from anything that might seem magical or pagan, frames everything in Christian terms, is careful never to claim too much knowledge or power. She also has to navigate the changing legal requirements around midwifery. Some authorities are beginning to require that midwives be licensed, that they swear oaths about their practice, that they agree to report certain things like illegitimate births or suspected infanticide. These requirements create new pressures and restrictions on Agnes's practice, new ways that her authority and autonomy are being limited. But despite these pressures and changes, Agnes also sees resistance, sees women and families continuing to prefer traditional midwives. Women want other women attending their births, want the experiential knowledge that midwives carry, want the emotional support and understanding that comes from someone who's been through childbirth themselves or attended hundreds of births. They don't want male physicians who've never experienced birth examining them intimately, who bring books but not wisdom, who have theory but not experience. Agnes also connects with other midwives, shares her concerns and experiences with them. They form informal networks of mutual support, share information about effective remedies and techniques, warn each other about suspicious families or dangerous situations. These networks help preserve midwifery knowledge and practice even as external pressures increase. She begins training younger women more deliberately, more urgently, feeling the need to pass on everything she knows before it's lost. She takes on apprentices, teaches them everything, insists they learn not just techniques, but also the wisdom that comes from experience. She wants to ensure that, even if midwifery changes, even if men take over some aspects of it, the knowledge that women have accumulated over centuries doesn't disappear entirely. Agnes also writes down some of her knowledge, or rather dictates it to someone who can write, creating a record of remedies and techniques that might otherwise be lost. This is unusual, most midwifery knowledge being oral, but Agnes recognizes that written records might survive where oral tradition could be disrupted. She also becomes more politically aware, more conscious of the need to protect midwives' legal and professional position. She speaks up when opportunities arise, defends midwifery practice, argues for the value of experiential knowledge and women's traditional role in childbirth. She's not radical or confrontational, that would be too dangerous, but she's firm in asserting that midwives deserve respect and that their knowledge is valuable. Through all these changes and challenges, Agnes maintains her practice, continues attending births, continues providing the care that women need and want. She adapts where she must, resists where she can, always prioritizing her patients' needs above her own pride or convenience. She knows the world is changing, knows that midwifery won't remain unchanged, but she's determined to preserve what's valuable, to pass on what she knows, to ensure that even if the form changes, the substance of caring for women through childbirth continues.
As Agnes contemplates these changes, she feels both concern and confidence. Concern about the future of midwifery, about whether the knowledge and traditions she values will survive. But also confidence that women will always need care during childbirth, will always want experienced, compassionate attendants, will always value the kind of support that only someone who truly understands birth can provide. The details may change, but the fundamental need will remain. And as long as that need exists, there will be women like Agnes to meet it. Agnes is old now, in her 70s, which is remarkably old for medieval times. She's attended births for nearly 50 years, has caught more babies than she can count, has seen generations of families, has watched babies she delivered grow up and have babies of their own whom she also delivers. She's lived a life of service, of sacred duty, of standing at the threshold between life and death countless times. And now, as her own strength fails, as her hands become too arthritic and her eyes too dim for the delicate work of midwifery, she's preparing to pass her knowledge to the next generation and to rest at last. Sitting by her fire on a winter evening, Agnes thinks about all the births she's attended. She can't remember them all individually anymore. There have been too many. But certain births stand out, are etched in her memory forever. The first birth she attended alone after her mentor died, when she was terrified but had to project confidence. The birth where both mother and baby seemed certain to die, but both survived through what felt like a miracle. The births that ended tragically, despite everything she could do. The births that were easy and joyful, that reminded her why she loved this work. She looks at her hands, these hands that have caught so many babies, that have guided so many new souls into the world.
They're gnarled now, twisted with arthritis, marked with scars and age spots. But they're also sacred in a way, consecrated by the work they've done. These hands have touched every baby born in her town for decades. These hands have saved lives, have eased pain, have provided comfort and care to countless women. She's proud of these hands, proud of what they've accomplished. Agnes has trained several younger women over the years, but there's one in particular, a woman named Catherine, who seems to have the true gift for midwifery. Catherine has the patience, the intuition, the steady hands and calm presence that midwifery requires. Agnes has taught her everything she knows, has taken her to hundreds of births, has shared all her knowledge of herbs and techniques and the wisdom that comes from experience. And Catherine has learned well, has absorbed it all, has begun to develop her own expertise and reputation. Recently, Agnes attended her last birth, though she didn't know it would be her last at the time. A young woman, the granddaughter of someone Agnes delivered decades ago, went into labor. Agnes wanted to attend, to see this third generation into the world. But her hands were shaking too much, her vision too dim in the candlelight. Catherine attended the birth while Agnes watched, advising but not doing the hands-on work. And it went beautifully. Catherine handling everything with skill and confidence, the baby arriving healthy, the mother doing well. Afterward, Agnes knew. It was time to retire fully, to step back, to let the next generation take over. Her body could no longer do the work her mind still understood. It was hard to accept, hard to let go of the identity and purpose that had defined her for 50 years. But it was also right, was the natural progression of things. Every midwife eventually grows too old for the work. Every generation must give way to the next. Now Agnes spends her days quietly, resting by her fire, receiving visits from people she's helped over the decades. Women bring their children and grandchildren to meet her, tell the children that this is the woman who brought them into the world. Young mothers come asking for advice about infant care or breastfeeding. Catherine stops by regularly to discuss difficult cases or to ask about particular remedies. The community honors Agnes in small ways that touch her deeply. People bring her gifts of food, of firewood, of small comforts that make her old age easier. They ask her blessing on new babies. They speak of her with respect and gratitude. She's not forgotten, not dismissed because she's old and no longer actively practicing. Instead, she's revered as an elder, as someone who served her community faithfully for decades, as a repository of wisdom and experience. Agnes thinks about all the secrets she's kept, all the knowledge she holds about families and births, and the intimate details of people's lives. These secrets will die with her, as they should. She'll never betray the confidences placed in her, will take them to her grave. But the other knowledge, the medical and herbal knowledge, the techniques and wisdom about childbirth that she's passed on, has ensured it will survive. She thinks about the babies who died, the mothers she couldn't save, the tragedies that happened despite her best efforts. These still hurt, still haunt her sometimes in the quiet moments. She wonders what she could have done differently, whether there were signs she missed, techniques she didn't try. But she also knows she did her best, that some deaths couldn't be prevented with the knowledge and tools available to her, that she saved far more lives than she lost. She thinks about the spiritual dimension of her work, about standing at the threshold between life and death so many times. She's seen souls enter the world, has witnessed the moment when a body becomes inhabited by life, when a baby takes that first breath and becomes a person. She's seen souls depart too, has been present when mothers or babies died, has felt the terrible absence when life leaves a body. These experiences have given her a perspective on life and death that few people have, an understanding of how fragile and precious life is, how thin the boundary between existence and non-existence. As night falls and Agnes prepares for sleep, she feels at peace. She's fulfilled her calling, has served her community faithfully, has brought hundreds of souls safely into the world. Her hands are worn out, but they've done good work, sacred work. Her body is tired, but it's earned its rest. She's ready to sleep, to rest after a life of service, to finally lay down the enormous responsibility she's carried for so long. In the village tonight, a woman is in labor. Catherine is there, attending the birth, using the knowledge Agnes taught her. Tomorrow, another baby will be born, and Catherine will catch it, will welcome it into the world, will continue the sacred work that Agnes has passed on to her. The cycle continues. Life continues. New souls continue crossing the threshold into existence, and there are still midwives to stand at that threshold and guide them through. Agnes drifts toward sleep, and in her mind she sees all the babies she's caught, all the tiny faces, all the first breaths and first cries. She sees the mothers' faces too, the relief and joy when birth succeeds, the gratitude in their eyes. She hears in her memory the sound of babies crying, that sound that means life, that means survival, that means success. It's a beautiful chorus. All these babies she's welcomed into the world, all these lives she's touched. And then sleep takes her, deep and peaceful sleep, the sleep of someone who's worked hard and faithfully, who's fulfilled her purpose,
who can rest knowing the work continues without her. Her breathing slows and deepens, her body finally fully relaxing after decades of vigilance and tension. The gatekeeper of life can rest at last, can lay down her burden, can sleep the deep sleep of the satisfied and the fulfilled. The world owes a debt to women like Agnes, to all the midwives throughout history who stood at the threshold of life, who guided souls into the world with skillful hands and brave hearts. They saved countless lives. They eased immeasurable suffering. They provided essential care with limited resources and enormous courage. They deserve to be remembered, to be honored, to have their stories told. So tonight, as we drift towards sleep ourselves, we can honor Agnes and all the midwives like her, can thank them for their service, can ensure they're not forgotten. Good night, Agnes. Rest well. Your work is done, and it was done well. Sleep peacefully, gatekeeper of life. The world is better because you stood at that threshold.